Hare Krishna. So today we're going to actually conclude the ISKCON of DC Bhakti Shastri course. We're on the Nectar of Devotion. So the part 9, the ninth class on that, and it's chapters 18 and 19. So we're going to conclude what's called the Eastern Ocean, which is an overview of a pure devotional service. It defines it and talks about the characteristics at different stages, with a particular focus on sadhana bhakti. The bhava bhakti and prema bhakti, the higher stages, are just briefly discussed, and those will be discussed in detail in the other oceans, later parts of the book. So today we're going to be finishing chapters 18 and 19. 18 is the second of two chapters covering bhava bhakti, and 19 is just a brief consideration of prema. So this is just an overview of bhakti. So these two things are considered only very quickly and generally, whereas sadhana bhakti was discussed in detail. So we'll start here with 18, and it's called the character of one in ecstatic love. That means bhava bhakti. And as it says, Rupa Goswami next describes the characteristics of a person who has actually developed his ecstatic love for Krishna, and then these are the characteristics. There's 9 of them. These are kind of objective qualities that you can see in people's behaviors. We talked a little bit about, that bhava softens the heart and makes it suitable for various transcendental emotions. And we mentioned in the stage of bhava, there are really 3 of them. They're called sattvika bhavas. There's 8 of them, but really only 3 of them manifest much in bhava. There's crying, the tears in the eyes, a choking up of the voice, and sometimes the hair is standing on end. Those are mentioned in the Shikshastakam, and what is it? The 6th verse. Nayanam Galadashru Dharaya, where the tears are coming from the eyes. He wants to know, Lord Chaitanya is asking, when will the time come when he experiences bhava, where the hairs will stand on end, pulakar, nishitamba pukada, and then his voice will choke up, gadgada, and the tears will come from his eyes. So sometimes these things are manifest, although Prabhupada says generally people in that stage conceal those things from prying eyes and from the public. But we'll find out that other people may seem to possess those. They may either pretend to have them, or we're going to hear it towards the end of this chapter about something called bhava abbas or rati abbas, where it's a semblance of those things may happen. But these 9 qualities that we're going to cover are present in somebody in bhava very strongly and intently and continuously. And so you can really tell their position by this. This is a reliable indicator, where you may not be able to distinguish somebody who's pretending or who has these abhasas. So these are the real core ways to tell. And so we'll go over. Prabhupada just summarizes them at the beginning. And I've included here in the PowerPoint the Sanskrit terminology and Prabhupada's translation. There's this verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we have Prabhupada's translation of that in his word-for-word translation. So that's where I've taken it from. So 1, it says, the person is always anxious to utilize time in the devotional service of the Lord, does not like to be idle, wants service always, 24 hours a day without deviation. And the Sanskrit is avyarta kalatvam, being free from wasting time, is what Prabhupada says in the word for word. He is always reserved and perseverance. Prabhupada calls this forgiveness, shanti, in the verse. Also, tolerance is there. It means that they continue their devotional service in spite of all kinds of impediments. So sometimes it may involve forgiveness, as we'll see in the example. If someone does something to you, or if something happens to you think is unjust, if you hold that in your heart, then you'll continue to be worried about that. It will disturb you continuously. It'll distract you from your service. So there's reserved, perseverant, tolerant, forgiving. These kind of things are indicated by that. Always attached from all material attraction. It's a vilaktihi, or detachment, and we'll see a little stronger definition of that. Does not long for any material respect in return for his activities. Mana shunyata, meaning the absence of false prestige. Shunyata means to be free from, or have a void there. So there's no man, pride. He is always certain that Krishna will bestow his mercy upon him. Ashabandha. Prabhupada says that as hope. And later on he says hope against hope. He is always very eager to serve the Lord faithfully. Samutkanta, eagerness, either to see the Lord, especially because if you want to see him, it's because you want to serve him. So Prabhupada is very eager to serve the Lord faithfully. Very much attached to the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Namagane. In chanting of the holy names, sada, always ruchi, taste. So there's always a taste for chanting the holy names of the Lord. This gives the lie to the notion that if we become more advanced and have some natural affection for the Lord, that the burdensome task of chanting so many rounds a day will be lifted, will be beyond the rules and regulations. Here it says there's no need for a rule and regulation to say you have to chant so much a day, because there's always the taste for it. There's going to be chanting more rounds than we do now. 8 is always eager to describe the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Asakti tat guna akyane. This asakti is almost like addiction. You're addicted to talking about Krishna's gunas, his qualities. And then 9 is very pleased to live in a place where the Lord's pastimes are performed, such as Mathura, Vrindavan, or Dwarka. Priti tat vasati stale. So affection or love for Krishna's places of residence. And Prabhupada says that the temple or holy places. So he includes the temple amongst those things. Prabhupada is saying when he was establishing temples, he was establishing little embassies of the spiritual world. So these also qualify. And then in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I discovered that there are so many of the verses of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that are quoted in here. And it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, in the 23rd chapter. And so these nine characteristics or qualities are the verses that they appear in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is quoted here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Prabhupada's translation, so you can see all the word for word translations. And Prabhupada just says, he translates as, when the seed of ecstatic emotion for Krishna fructifies, the following 9 symptoms manifest in one's behavior: forgiveness, concern that time should not be wasted, detachment, absence of false prestige, hope, eagerness, a taste for chanting the holy name of the Lord, attachment to descriptions of the transcendental qualities of the Lord, and affection for those places where the Lord resides. That is, a temple or a holy place like Vrindavan. These are called anubhava, subordinate signs of ecstatic emotion. They are visible in a person in whose heart the seed of love of God has begun to fructify. So the kind of outward ones are these sattvika bhavas, these transformations of ecstasy. But these things, these anubhavas, are constant things, so they're always there. And if you observe them, then you can discern with certainty that this is a person who has bhava bhakti. And then, so we'll look at them, and also we'll see that the verses in the Chaitanya in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu are also quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, because this chapter 23 is part of Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami. That's what's going on here. So Lord Chaitanya is speaking about these things, and so And so he speaks some of the verses that Rupa Goswami uses in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So these are Lord Chaitanya's verses, or sometimes Lord Chaitanya is quoting them from other places as well. And he also has sometimes a little introduction to the verses that isn't there in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but it's quite nice as we're hearing from Lord Chaitanya. And so I've switched in the verse. You might have noticed that the original list that Prabhupada has at the beginning of the chapter is the 1 and 2 are reversed in the verse, and so we're going to start with the perseverance or tolerance at Shantir. First, because that's how it appears in the verse, that's how it appears in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and also Prabhupada has this interesting purport to this one that connects it with the not wasting of time. And so we quote a verse that establishes is evidence and also a description of that quality of perseverance, or tolerance, or forgiveness, or these things. And then there's one that's quoted for the not wasting of time. But Prabhupada sees a connection between the one about tolerance that also connects with not wasting of time. So I wanted to preserve in his purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I wanted to reverse the order so we could take advantage of that as well. So Prabhupada says in the Nectar Devotion, when a person is undisturbed, even in the presence of various causes of disturbance, he is called reserved and perseverant. This is just a straightforward translation of the verse in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So even when there's cause, it's easy to be peaceful when there's no cause of trouble. So even when there's really cause for disturbance, they're not disturbed. And Lord Chaitanya says, if love for Krishna in a seedling state, this is CC Madhya Lila 2320, if love for Krishna in a seedling state has fructified in one's heart, one is not agitated by material things. That's how he puts it, how he defines it. And then there's the verse. And this is actually a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam. O Brahmanas, just accept me as a completely surrendered soul. So this is in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but this is also a verse appears in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And so Prabhupada has the translation in Nectar of Devotion, but I thought where we had these verses quoted like this, it would be interesting you can have it as a reference. You can see all the word-for-word translations and things. And there's also a purport. O Brahmanas, just accept me as a completely surrendered soul. This is Maharaj Parikshit. And let Mother Ganges, the representative of the Lord, also accept me in that way. For I have already taken the lotus feet of the Lord into my heart. Let the snake bird or whatever magical thing the Brahmana created bite me at once. I only desire that you all continue singing the deeds of Lord Vishnu. And Prabhupada says, this is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by Maharaj Parikshit while he was sitting on the bank of the Ganges expecting to be bitten by a snake bird summoned by the curse of a Brahmana boy named Shringi, who was the son of a great sage named Shamika. News of the curse was conveyed to the king, who prepared for his imminent death. Many great saintly persons, sages, brahmanas, kings, and demigods came to see him in his last days. Maharaj Parikshit, however, was not at all afraid of being bitten by the snake bird. Indeed, he requested all the great personalities assembled to continue chanting the holy name of Lord Vishnu. So the next verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita also appears in, this is actually, this is Lord Chaitanya's speaking here. Not a moment should be lost. Every moment should be utilized for Krishna or connected with him. So this is the not wasting of time. And here's the purport that Prabhupada says, I think is interesting. He says, Maharaj Parikshit's expression of anxiety is explained in this verse. He says, let whatever is destined to happen. So he's talking about the previous verse. Let whatever is destined to happen take place. It doesn't matter. Just let me see that not a moment of my time is wasted without a relationship with Krishna. One has to tolerate all obstacles on the path of Krishna consciousness, and one has to see that not a moment of his life is wasted outside of Krishna's service. So the previous verse was intended to illustrate this perseverance, tolerance, forgiveness. But of course, since it's exhibiting bhava, the other characteristics are there. So here Prabhupada is showing a connection with one of the other qualities, the desire not to waste time. The next verse actually is the one that they use to illustrate that the most. But I thought it was interesting. He saw a connection between those two. He said not only wasn't he disturbed, but he didn't want to waste any time worrying about it. He wanted to continue his service. And so the next verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita says this verse it's quoted from the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya, but it's found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So this is there. This is what's given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Prabhupada translates this in the Nectar of Devotion. With their words, they offer prayers to the Lord. With their minds, they always remember the Lord. With their bodies, they offer obeisances to the Lord. Despite all these activities, they are still not satisfied. This is the nature of pure devotees. Shedding tears from their eyes, they dedicate their whole lives to the Lord's service. So that it's even though they're doing everything all the time, it's still not satisfying to them. Right? We waste time because we become satisfied with our level of service, and may wish for a distraction. We may look at what our we may balance our devotional service in terms of what's required from us, what are our obligations. But here it says these persons are with everything. Their words, they're praying with their words, they're remembering with their minds, and with their bodies they're offering obeisances or other kinds of service also. And despite all that, they're not satisfied. They dedicate their whole lives to the Lord's service. So this is the stage of bhava. There's no wasting of time. And then this detachment, this one here is Lord Chaitanya's comment here. He says, in the material field, people are interested in material enjoyment, mystic power, and sense gratification, but these things do not appeal to the devotee at all. So this is what it means for material desires. So there's material enjoyment, bhukti, siddhi, mystic powers, or objects of the senses, indriyartha. So none of those things have any. It says they do not appeal. And then the verse that Rupa Goswami illustrates this with, this is also in the Nectar of in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and Prabhupada quotes it. They use the example of Maharaj Bharat, who was the emperor of the world. This is King Bharat was very eager to attain the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who is called Uttama Shloka because poems and prayers are offered to him for his favor. In his youth, King Bharata gave up his attractive wife and children, as well as his beloved friends and opulent kingdom, just as one gives up stool after passing it. And Prabhupada has a little purport. He says, these are the signs of virakti, detachment, found in a person who has developed bhava, the preliminary stage of love of Godhead. This verse is quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam 5:14-43. And then in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada offers a little commentary on that. He says, Emperor Bharata provides a typical example of detachment. He had everything enjoyable in the material world, but he left it. This means that detachment does not mean artificially keeping oneself aloof and apart from the allurements of attachment. Even in the presence of such allurements, if one can remain unattracted by material attachments, he is called detached. Okay? And now we have the freedom of pride. This is back to Lord Chaitanya introducing this. He says, although a pure devotee's standard is above all, he is a sarvatama, standing above all. So I mean the best of all, the best one. Sarva means everything. Uttama means the best. It's just the very best. He still considers himself to be in the lowest stage of life. Hinakari, mane, thinks of himself the lowest. Although he's sarva uttama, or sarvotama, if you connect the two. That's how Lord Chaitanya defines that. And then in this verse is a quotation from the Padma Purana. It's appearing here in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's the verse that Rupa Goswami uses in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to illustrate this particular point. And there's King Bhagirat always carried affection for Krishna within his heart. Although King Bhagirat was the crown jewel of kings, he was still wandering about and begging alms in the city of his enemies. He was even offering respect to chandalas, low-class men who eat dogs. So generally we expect kings to be quite proud and to feel superior to others. And here it says, even and not necessarily very inclined to their enemies. He was begging alms in the city of his enemies and honoring even the lowest people. So that's a sign of bhava. And Prabhupada has he comments further in the Nectar Devotion. He says, there are many similar instances in the history of India. Even very recently, about 200 years ago or less, one big landlord known as Lal Babu, a Calcutta landholder, became a Vaishnava and lived in Vrindavan. He was also begging from door to door, even at the homes of his political enemies. Begging involves being ready to be insulted by persons to whose home one has come. That is natural. But one has to tolerate such insults for the sake of Krishna. The devotee of Krishna can accept any position in the service of Krishna. So that mana shunyata, free from the pride. And then Prabhupada here, and for the next one, the hope, Ashabandha, hoping against hope, he says something. He gives a comment. This is his own comment here in the Nectar of Devotion. He says, the strong conviction that one will certainly receive the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called in Sanskrit Ashabandha. Ashabandha means to continue to think, because I am trying my best to follow the routine principles of devotional service, I am sure that I will go back to Godhead, back to home. We're going to see here that there's like a tension in this Ashabandha, that there's a feeling of not deserving, but there's a conviction and confidence in the Lord's mercy. So one doesn't feel worthy, but one feels confident that one will get the Lord's mercy because of the Lord's, having confidence in the Lord's kindness. It's an interesting tension in this quality. And so here's what Lord Chaitanya says. He says, a fully surrendered devotee always hopes that Lord Krishna will be kind to him. This hope is very firm in him. So that's what it is. So it's not that it's, so there's the confidence is in Krishna's mercy. And then the verse this is quoted. It's here in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's also found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is the verse that Rupa Goswami uses to illustrate this quality. O my Lord, I do not have any love for you, nor am I qualified for discharging devotional service by chanting and hearing. Nor do I possess the mystic power of a Vaishnava, knowledge, or pious activities, nor do I belong to a very high caste family. On the whole, I do not possess anything. Still, O beloved of the gopis, because you bestow your mercy on the most fallen, I have an unbreakable hope that is constantly in my heart. That hope is always giving me pain. So, of course, somebody in this stage of bhakti has so many good qualities, actually. But they feel, my understanding is that they have such a higher understanding of Krishna than we do, that they can perceive more about how there's no way to deserve Krishna's love and concern. That it's truly causeless, that Krishna is so wonderful that you can't really buy it, you can't really earn it. And so they feel that they don't have any real qualification for receiving it. They feel that more acutely than we do, because we don't understand Krishna so deeply. And but yet they have such confidence in Krishna's kindness that they still feel that they will get it. And that's the tension that's here. And Prabhupada, he kind of summarized the first part of it before when he said that simply because I'm trying my best to follow the regulative principles, I'm certain I'll go back to Godhead. That was more confidence in Krishna. And here he says this is more where the feeling of unqualification is there. He says the purport is that under this heading of Ashabandha, one should continue to hope against hope that some way or other he will be able to approach the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So there's this really sweet tension there. that you're really hoping to receive something that you're not deserving because Krishna is so kind. And so there's a feeling of great gratitude and hope and humility. And then the next one, eagerness. Prabhupada also has a little, in the Nectar Devotion, this is kind of his own, I like to quote the places where Prabhupada adds his own kind of purports to it, so we don't miss out on that. When one is sufficiently eager to achieve success in devotional service, this is an additional explanation that's not given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Prabhupada giving a little extra explanation, kind of a purport there. When one is sufficiently eager to achieve success in devotional service, that eagerness is called samukanta. This means complete eagerness. Actually, this eagerness is the price for achieving success in Krishna consciousness. Everything has some value, and one has to pay the value before obtaining or possessing it. It is stated in the Vedic literature that to purchase the most valuable thing, Krishna consciousness, one has to develop intense eagerness for achieving success. So again, it's not that one thinks that one can deserve it, but you're reacting to Krishna's causeless mercy and understanding the real value of it. So you're eager to do whatever you can, right, in reciprocation to Krishna. So it doesn't violate the previous one where you feel unworthy, but you also then feel an obligation. If you feel gratitude, you want to reciprocate. So you can't reciprocate anywhere near enough. That's why there's tremendous eagerness. That's why, in not wasting time, it's even then they're not satisfied by dedicating their full time to Krishna consciousness. But there's they're really highly motivated to give something back to Krishna, to show some appreciation. So that's how that works. Lord Chaitanya, he defines it this way in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because he's doing the same thing. He quotes the verse of the 9 qualities, and he's illustrating them one after another, following, and the Rupa Goswami follows the same thing for the same illustrative verses in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But these little short definitions here are Lord Chaitanya's. This eagerness is chiefly characterized by an ardent desire to associate with the Lord. That's from the Madhya Lila 23:30. And then in 23:31 is the verse that Rupa Goswami uses to illustrate. Actually, let me see. No, he doesn't use this one. This is interesting. There's a couple of places in this chapter where Lord Chaitanya uses a different text from the same work to illustrate the characteristic. So this one is not quoted in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami uses a related but different verse. So I thought I would include it because we get the chance to see the verse illustrated twice, and it's useful. So it says, "O Krishna." This is from the Krishna Karnamrita, Bilvamangal Thakur, verse 32. O Krishna, O flute player, the sweetness of your early age is wonderful within these 3 worlds. You know my unsteadiness, and I know yours. No one else knows about this. I want to see your beautiful, attractive face somewhere in a solitary place, but how can this be accomplished? And so this is the eagerness of seeing and being able to serve Krishna. And then in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Rupa Goswami also quotes the Krishna Karnamrita, but he uses text 54. And here's what that Prabhupada translates that in the Nectar of Devotion. I am eagerly waiting to see that boy of Vrindavan, whose bodily beauty is captivating the whole universe, whose eyes are always bounded by black eyebrows and expanded like lotus petals, and who is always eagerly glancing over his devotees and therefore moving slightly here and there. His eyes are always moist, his lips are colored like copper, and through those lips there comes a sound vibration which drives one madder than a mad elephant. I want so much to see him at Vrindavan. So similar moods to illustrate that point, but 2 different verses. And then the next one, the attachment to the chanting of the holy name, Namagane Sadaruchi. Lord Chaitanya says, due to having great relish, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, due to having great relish for the holy name, one is inclined to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra constantly. It's a constant taste. And then Rupa Goswami and Lord Chaitanya both have this verse to illustrate that point. O Govinda, this youthful girl named Radhika is today constantly pouring forth tears like nectar falling from flowers as she sings your holy names in a sweet voice. It's an illustration of that Sadanama Ruchi, constant taste for the chanting. And then Krishna Gunakyane, the desire to always chant Krishna's glories and to speak them. Lord Chaitanya says, at this stage of bhava, a devotee has awakened the tendency to chant and describe the transcendental qualities of the Lord. He has attachment for this process. And the verse that's given here, I think this is also a different verse. Lord Chaitanya quotes this one from Bilvamangal Thakur's Krishna Karanamrita. It's text 92. And in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and Prabhupada translates in the Nectar of Devotion, it's verse 88. So again, we get two illustrations for the price of one by taking a look at this parallel text. O my Lord, this is the one that Lord Chaitanya quotes. O my Lord, the transcendental body of Krishna is very sweet, and his face is even sweeter than his body. There's all this maduram, maduram in the verse. Maduram, maduram, vaparasya vipur, maduram, maduram, vadanam, maduram, madhu gandhi, madhu smitam etadaho, maduram, 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 maduram. Sweet, sweet, sweet. It's all this sweet. Oh my Lord, the transcendental body of Krishna is very sweet, and his face is even sweeter than his body, but his soft smile, which has the fragrance of honey, is sweeter still. That's also from Bhova Mangal Thakur's Krishna Karanapa. That's text 92. And Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and which Prabhupada translates in Nectar of Devotion, is from 88. Also the same thing, Krishna Karanamrita. What shall I do for Krishna, who is pleasing beyond all pleasurable conceptions, and who is naughtier than all restless boys? The idea of Krishna's beautiful activities is attracting my heart, and I do not know what I can do. So they're thinking of Krishna's personal qualities there, in both cases. And then the last one, Krishna Lilastane, Lord Chaitanya says, a devotee absorbed in ecstatic emotion for Krishna always resides in a place where Krishna's pastimes were performed. And Rupa Goswami and both Lord Chaitanya and Rupa Goswami quote this one as the illustration of that particular quality. O Lord Pundarikaksha, while chanting your holy name with tears in my eyes, when shall I dance in ecstasy on the bank of the Yamuna? And actually, I think this one, let me see. Yeah, I think, no, okay, that one, I think, yeah, it's also in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And then there's also in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's a next one that was Rupa Goswami compiled the Padyavali, this book of verses. And so it says, Prabhupada quotes this, Rupa Goswami also has this in the Nectar of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In the book Padyavali by Rupa Goswami, there is the following statement about Vrindavan. In this place the son of Maharaj Nanda used to live with his father, who was king of all cowherd men. In this place Lord Krishna broke the cart in which the Shakatasura demon was concealed. At this place Damodar, who can cut the knot of our material existence, was tied up by his mother Yashoda. So people are residing in there and traveling to the places and remembering Krishna's Leela. And then Prabhupada says, and this is Prabhupada's comment here, a pure devotee of the Lord resides in the district of Mathura or Vrindavan and visits all the places where Krishna's pastimes were performed. At these sacred places, Krishna displayed his childhood activities with the cowherd boys and Mother Yashoda. The system of circumambulating all these places is still current among devotees of Lord Krishna, and those coming to Mathura and Vrindavan always feel transcendental pleasure. Actually, if someone goes to Vrindavan, he will immediately feel separation from Krishna, who performed such nice activities when he was present there. So that's a little extra commentary by Srila Prabhupada. It doesn't appear in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He put that commentary into his Nectar of Devotion. And then now, we talked about how those 9 symptoms that we covered, were things that really can't be imitated. They can't be, you can't have them in a pretend way. They're something that's there continuously and are really reliable indications of bhava. And so here we're going to discuss some cases where the external manifestations of bhava, the soft heart with the ecstatic emotions, are not genuine. And there's 3 cases. 2 of them are given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and one of them is added by Srila Prabhupada, I think, because I don't believe that this particular one was very prevalent in Lord Chaitanya's time, but has become more and more prevalent in modern times. So it's a little bit of an addition to deal with modern times, and so it's Prabhupada says. This is my comment. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami mentions that sometimes symptoms of bhava seem to appear in unqualified persons. They don't have bhava. Jiva Goswami says that the symptoms might be either softness of heart or the ecstatic symptoms like tears. So you might see these in persons that don't have bhava. And then here's Prabhupada's comment here. He says, it is said by Rupa Goswami that the attachment exhibited by pure devotees for Krishna cannot possibly be perfected in the hearts of fruitive workers, karmis, or mental speculators. Prabhupada's really just translating one of the verses from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Because such attachment in pure Krishna consciousness is very rare and not possible to achieve even for many liberated persons. So he says you can't expect the symptoms of bhava just in any old person. Even liberated persons don't attain bhava easily. So it's all really exalted persons that have the genuine symptoms. He says, this attachment is very confidentially kept by Krishna and is bestowed only upon pure devotees. Even ordinary devotees cannot have such pure attachment for Krishna. Therefore, how is it possible for success to be achieved by persons whose hearts are contaminated by the actions and reactions of fruitive activities and who are entangled by various types of mental speculation? Rhetorical questions means that they can't. It can't happen. If we see apparent manifestations of these things, they're not genuine unless they're genuine devotees of a very high grade, bhava bhakti. But sometimes they're seen, and so how they're seen and why they're seen are described. Rupa Goswami mentions 2 varieties of apparent bhava in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and Prabhupada mentions the 3rd one in the Nectar of Devotion. That's the kind of the updated for modern times, I think. And the one that Prabhupada adds is he says that there are some persons who pretend to have bhava. He says there are impersonal, and he gives a couple of things. There are impersonalist philosophers and mystics, however, who by a show of devotional service want ultimately to merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord. They sometimes try to imitate a pure devotee's sentiment for visiting the holy places where Krishna had his pastimes, but they simply have a view for salvation, and so their activities cannot be considered attachment. In classical times, and Prabhupada mentions this in one of the purports in Bhagavad Gita, that the real, classic impersonalists and Mayavadis, that they would practice really strong renunciation. So there had to be completely celibate. There would be very, very strong vairagya. Renunciation would be there. They're trying to withdraw from the world. It's more recently that people have made this kind of other kind of thing where you're allowed to perform worship for some time. That's to prepare you for your ultimate understanding of the impersonal absolute. Because the Mayavadis think that the form of the Lord is part of the realm of illusion. But yet you can still worship. And they say you can worship usually any god you want. And that will somehow be helpful for your purification. And then at some point you realize that you are the Supreme, or you and the Supreme are one, and you give up that worship. And so that's kind of what you see. That's what he's talking about here, more or less. And he says there are many so-called devotees who artificially, this is important, artificially think of Krishna's pastimes known as Ashtakaliya Lila. There can be genuine people who do this. Sometimes one may artificially imitate these, pretending that Krishna is talking with him in the form of a boy, or else one may pretend that Radharani and Krishna both have come to him and are talking with him. Such characteristics are sometimes exhibited by the impersonalist class of men, and they may captivate some innocent persons who have no knowledge in the science of devotional service. He says, if such a pretender is sometimes seen possessing imitative attachment to Krishna, that will not be accepted as real attachment. My Guru Maharaj said he was in Vrindavan one time, and some person came into the kirtan and was, rolling on the ground and crying and showing these apparent ecstatic symptoms. And some of the devotees told Prabhupada about him, and Prabhupada said, throw him out. And they did. They picked him up by his hands and feet and took him outside of the gate of the temple. This was in Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram Mandir. And the person, after he was set down, he stood up, indignantly brushed the dust off himself, and pulled out a cigarette or bidi and started to smoke. So it was just a show. You notice that wasn't one of the characteristics of Baba. Now the other ones, these are the ones that are mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's something called the semblance of Bhava. Rati Abhasa. Rati is another. It's a synonym for Bhava. So Bhava Abhasa, Rati Abhasa. Abhasa means like it says like a semblance is a good thing. Like Prabhupada says like the dawning twilight, just a little hint of it. Like we have Namabhasa, which it's like that. It's sometimes it's some kind of a faint representation of it. Like when the sun rises, before the sun actually appears upon the horizon, there's a little bit of light that comes. After the sun has disappeared from view, there's also some remaining light afterwards. That's kind of an abhasa. There's just a little bit of a semblance of it. And so Rupa Goswami names two categories there's two categories of that. There's shadow, which is chaya, and reflective, pratibimba. Now, this section was kind of difficult for me because Prabhupada is very clearly following the verses, but he uses some different terminology, and it seems to me he was trying to kind of just summarize this. Maybe the details of this might not be that important to us, but it made it kind of confusing for me to try to understand. But he says there's two kinds. One is shadow. This is the other one is para. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's pratibimba. So I don't know if what it is, if it's an editing thing, if it's just another term that's the same thing. I'm not sure why it's like that. And then in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it says that the pratibimba takes place in those with material desires or desires for liberation. So they have some desires, and they practice some of the elements of bhakti. And because they have sometimes the association of devotees who have genuine bhava, and so they've kind of incorporated a little bit of bhakti into their practice. The overall thing is like sometimes you have people who are they're not even genuine devotees. They're more like they have a little bit of interest. They may be incorporating a little bit of bhakti into their lives, or they're interested in trying it out. So not even really devotees, much less serious ones. But by the association of advanced devotees, they show like a little bit of a hint of these symptoms. And so for the pratibimba ones, the reflective ones, Rupa Goswami says these are people that have strong material desires or desire for liberation. So they're kind of motivated. And so they incorporate, they have some, sometime association with devotees. And they incorporate a little bit of bhakti into their practice. And they feel some happiness from that. And it says that, I think Jiva Goswami says that even when they're not in the association of devotees, it can persist for some time. This little semblance of it. And I'm seeing what Prabhupada says in the Nectar Devotion and following along in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And so what's appearing there is very clearly he's following the verses that Rupa Goswami has. And so it seemed that there's a little part here in the Nectar of Devotion that was taken right from the verse where Rupa Goswami describes pratibimba, or reflection. Sometimes it's found that a person actually attached to material enjoyment or salvation, so that's their things. Either they have material desires or desire for liberation, that's coming from that verse, has the good fortune to associate with pure devotees. While they are engaged in chanting, this is Prabhupada's here, while they are engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord, by the good grace of the Lord, one may also cooperate and join in the chanting. And then he gives this kind of poetic expression which comes directly from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. At that time, simply by the association of such pure devotees, the moon-like rays from their hearts reflect upon him. That's why it's reflection. So it says just that, and the Jiva Goswami says that because they have desires, it's not a perfect reflection; it's an obscured reflection. But they may show some of these, they may show softness of heart, as he said, or some of the crying, or usually like that, tears from the eyes. They may show some of that, and it may be even fairly vivid because it's reflecting like that. And then what Rupa Goswami says, he describes shadow as another form of rati abhas, and says it appears in those who have a small interest in Krishna. So they don't have the same kind of ulterior motive as the other ones do. I would characterize them more like the people who are a little inquisitive in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, but they haven't really taken up devotional service. But sometimes they come. He says it's very unstable, but they have a small interest in Krishna. It's unstable, but they're kind of, they're inquisitive. They're interested a little bit in Krishna, some interest in Krishna. And he says even though it's unstable, it destroys all their suffering. It's interesting. And he says it can appear even in ignorant people who perform some devotional activity. So they participate in festivals of the Lord or in the holy dham. They do something. They do some kind of devotional activity. They participate in festivals of the Lord, or they're in the holy dham, and they do these things in the presence of devotees. So they're not maybe as focused as the people who have the ulterior motives, but they're kind of always maybe a little curious, Prabhupada says inquisitive. And so it's not as intense and it's not very stable, but even that, it says, removes some of their material miseries. And so in the Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada seems to describe these two together, even in the same sentence. But what I saw in the Nectar Devotion that seemed to correspond to what was in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was this section. Prabhupada says, if someone without undergoing the regulative principles of devotional service or without being guided by a bona fide spiritual master shows such imitative attachment, this is called shadow attachment. And then here he says, and by the influences, this is actually a continuation of the sentence that I used to describe the pratibimba. It seems like he just described them together. I think he was kind of trying to summarize this whole thing. The idea basically, right, is that the association of devotees is so powerful that even persons who are just kind of in the vicinity, who are unqualified, not even real devotees, they can be affected and have some powerful transformations that happen in their body. They're not the genuine thing. It happens much more strongly in those in bhava. But I think I've heard devotees, tell stories, similar to that when people, Prabhupada might be at the airport, or there might be some other, Rath Yatra or something, where people from the public, would see Prabhupada and the devotees and would start dancing in ecstasy, or they would. The one devotee was saying he'd seen Prabhupada for the first time, and everybody was bowing down. He just felt this, urge to bow down. So it seems like these kind of things were kind of commonplace. And Prabhupada says that these aren't genuine symptoms, but if they get the mercy of devotee, they can come to the level of bhava. It can be a beginning for them. So anyway, this is where I think Prabhupada this is where Prabhupada is really quoting from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where Rupa Goswami describes as shadow. He says, and by the influence of the pure devotees, he may show some likeness of attachment caused by inquisitiveness, some interest, as Rupa Goswami says. But this is very flickering, and that's what Rupa Goswami says is the nature of this shadow, or chaya. And if by the manifestation of such shadow attachment one feels the disappearance of all material pangs, which happens, that's what he says happens. That is called para attachment. So I can't follow so well You know, that's the only place that Prabhupada kind of defines the para. He just seems to call everything else shadow, and para seems like if it's more intense in some way. And the pratibimba is like that. It is more intense. And then Prabhupada says, such shadow attachment, this is also what Rupa Goswami is saying, such shadow attachment or para, he says or para, but at least this is more for shadow, and according to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, can develop if one associates with a pure devotee or visits holy places like Vrindavan or Mathura, and if an ordinary man develops such attachment for Krishna and fortunately performs devotional activities, in the association of pure devotees, he can also rise to the platform of pure devotional service. That's that's an important part. It's there in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as well. That they're not genuine symptoms, but if they get the mercy of these devotees, they can come up to the real platform of pure devotion. And then it says, by the mercy of an advanced devotee, the rati abhasa can become actual bhava. Prabhupada indicated that before. Here Prabhupada says even more. He describes it even more clearly. The conclusion is that transcendental attachment is so powerful that if such attachment is seen manifested even in some common man, by the association of a pure devotee, it can bring one to the perfectional stage. But such attachment for Krishna cannot be invoked in a person without his being sufficiently blessed by the association of pure devotees. And then Prabhupada, he says, even for the people who are pretending, he mentioned that kind of third category, and he said, if such a pretender is sometimes seen possessing imitative attachment to Krishna, that will not be accepted as real attachment. It may be said, however, that such attachment gives the pretender hope that he may eventually rise into the actual platform of pure devotional service. He says even that has some value. And then they mention offenses. We got the blessings of the Lord, of the devotees, and what about if you make offenses? And offenses to devotees, however, will cause someone in rati abhasa to lose their rati abhasa altogether, rather than to rise to the level of real bhava. So they may have that semblance of bhava, reflective or para or pratibimba. But if they make offenses to those persons, then it will lose it. And Prabhupada says, to be more clear, by the association of pure devotees, attachment for Krishna can be aroused. But if one commits offenses at the lotus feet of a devotee, one's shadow attachment or para attachment can be extinguished. This extinguishing is like the waning of the full moon. This is right from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which gradually decreases and at last becomes dark. One should therefore be very careful while associating with pure devotees to guard against committing an offense at their lotus feet. Then in the next verse, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Prabhupada takes it as a further explanation of what was being said here about an elaboration on the subject of persons with rati abhas losing it by offenses. He says, transcendental attachment, either shadow or para, can be nullified by different degrees of offenses at the lotus feet of pure devotees. If the offense is very serious, then one's attachment becomes almost nil, and if the offense is not very serious, one's attachment can become second or third class. The Jiva Goswami in the commentary indicates that this verse can actually apply to not just the abhas, the semblance of bhava, but even for people in real bhava, they have to be careful of offenses. He says that someone in bhava can have that bhava destroyed by a grave offense. He can have real bhava turned into this rati abhas semblance by a medium offense, and a mild offense will reduce the quality of his bhava. That's what he says. So it's so offenses are dangerous, really dangerous for the people who have a semblance. It'll kill their opportunities to move forward. But it's even dangerous for people in the stage of bhava itself. That's interesting. And then Prabhupada says, if someone becomes attached to the principles of salvation or to merging into the existence of the Brahmajyotir, his ecstasies gradually, and so here Prabhupada's talking about real bhava, his ecstasies gradually diminish into shadow and para attachment. See, his bhava turns into to bhava, to rati abhas, the semblance of bhava. Or else transform into the principles of ahangrahopasana. This ahangrahopasana describes a living entity when he begins spiritual realization by identifying himself with the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada gets this second part right from the commentary of Jiva Goswami. There's certain places here, I'm kind of trying to follow along. I have a translation of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and there are certain places where it's clear Prabhupada is reading the commentaries and he's using them too. This is just like he did with his other works. He's reading commentaries by the acharyas as he made them. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the destructive mentality mentioned above results from how you become attached to principles of salvation and merging into the existence of the Brahmajyotir. It's because you associate intimately with those attached to those things. So that's so the association is also very, very important. That's how you come by. Prabhupada says if someone becomes attached to the principles of salvation or merging into the existence of the Brahmajyotir, his ecstasies gradually diminish. And he says how that happens is that you associate intimately with people who have that understanding and desire. And then a couple other points. Here it says, sometimes it's found, and this is coming directly from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, a Nava Bhakta, they say, a new one, a new Bhakti Prabhupada says, sometimes it's found that the neophyte is taking part in chanting and dancing very enthusiastically, but within himself he is under the impression that he has become one with the Supreme Whole. This conception of monism is completely different from pure transcendental devotional service. Okay, so it says sometimes brand new people will maybe seem to show some ecstatic symptoms, right? But it may come from this notion of being excited because they think they become one with God. He says other people who are brand new, he says, if, however, it is seen that a person has developed a high standard of devotion, so there's not just some abbas here, but the real thing, without having undergone even the regulative principles, it is to be understood that his status of devotional service was achieved in a former life. For some reason or other, it had been temporarily stopped, most probably by an offense committed at the lotus feet of devotee. Right, so we know from Bhagavad Gita that there's no loss or diminution in one's devotional service. So what happens if somebody, at a high level like that, commits a grave offense, which Jiva Goswami says will make them lose their bhava entirely? Well, it says then that the offense will wear off, and in the next life they'll seem to just suddenly pop up and they have bhava, and there's no apparent cause for it. They didn't do sadhana, they didn't do anything, because they already had that. They just had to. The offense caused them to be sidetracked for some time, and then they come back to that level. And then it's mentioned in the commentary that people, or actually it's mentioned previously in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that somebody at the stage of bhava, they're very, very pure, but they still have some anarthas, they still have some unwanted things in them. So one doesn't become purified it says and there's a Madhurya Kadambini, it says that one doesn't become fully purified of all anarthas until one reaches this level of prema and sees Krishna face to face, especially the ones that come from the offenses to chanting the holy name. These things are very persistent. So it says sometimes even somebody in the stage of bhava, even though they're very, very pure compared to the rest of us, may do something that's wrong because there's some anarthas remaining. And so it says in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it says you should be very careful not to make an offense. If you see some defect in a person like that, be very, very careful not to make an offense. Right? It doesn't mean they're not in the level of bhava. It just means they're not 100% pure, and we shouldn't look at that in an offensive way. We have to see how dangerous that might be. And Prabhupada says, if a person is completely detached from material enjoyment and has developed pure ecstatic devotion, even if he sometimes accidentally found not living up to the standard of devotional service. One should not be envious of him. It is confirmed also in Bhagavad Gita, we discussed this verse, that a devotee who has unflinching faith and devotion to the Lord, even if sometimes found to be accidentally deviated from pure devotional characteristics, should still be counted among the pure. And then the verse that Rupa Goswami gives as evidence, he says, in the Nrsimha Purana it is stated, if a person has completely engaged his mind, body, and activities in the service of the Supreme Godhead, but externally is found to be engaged in some abominable activities, these abominable activities will surely be very quickly vanquished by the influence of his staunch devotional force. And then Prabhupada uses an example that he uses quite often. He says, the example is given that on the full moon there are some spots which may appear to be pockmarks. Still the illumination spread by the full moon cannot be checked. So we should see all of the glorious qualities and ignore the tiny little remaining contamination. And if we don't, we do it at our own peril. Krishna is not pleased with us, and we will suffer the reactions for that. So now, like I said, the eastern ocean of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is an overview of bhakti. So we heard a lot about sadhana. We heard a little bit about bhava, not the details. I keep saying that we're not going to talk about the details. And prema, which is even more exalted, they just give a very brief description, because these things will be taken up in later parts of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in detail. So this chapter 19, Devotional Service and Pure Love of God, Krishna Prema, we're just going to get a very, very quick overview of that here in this section of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And so it says that prema arises when bhava becomes very condensed. The word is sandratma. And when one's desire to love Krishna in one's particular relationship becomes intensified, this is what Prabhupada says, this is known as pure love of Godhead. It also has the Lord as its exclusive object, and we're going to see something from the Chaitanya Charitamrita again here. The verse that's given Prabhupada, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Prabhupada quotes here in the Nectar of Devotion, he says, in the Narada Pancharatra, it is clearly stated that when lust is completely transferred to the Supreme Godhead, it becomes a desire to serve, not a desire to have, and the concept of kinship is completely reposed in him. Such is accepted as pure love of God by great authorities like Bhishma, Prahlad, Uddhava, and Narada. And then this topic is taken up in the Chaitanya Charitamrita at the beginning of chapter 23. This is Lord Chaitanya speaking to Sanatana Goswami. And this is the verse that's quoted in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, how it defines how bhava transforms into prema. When that bhava softens the heart completely, it already makes it soft. It becomes endowed with a great feeling of possessiveness. It's mamatva, as if it's mine, in relation to the Lord. And it's my object of devotion, and becomes not possessiveness in the mundane sense, but that this is my my master, my friend, the object of my devotion and love. Endowed with a feeling of possessiveness in relation to the Lord, and becomes very much condensed and intensified. Sandra Atma. It is called prema, love of Godhead, by learned scholars. So sometimes it says that bhava is like the beginning of the description given was like it was one ray, that prema was like the sun, and bhava was like one ray from that sun of love of Godhead. So it intensifies and grows and becomes prema. And then this verse was this Rupa Goswami quotes this in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to illustrate this, and this is also in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya also uses this as an illustration. When one develops an unflinching sense of ownership or possessiveness in relation to Lord Vishnu, or in other words, when one thinks Vishnu and no one else to be the only object of love. Okay, so that clarifies that. Not ordinary possessiveness, ownership or possessiveness. No one else be the only object of love. Such an awakening is called bhakti, devotion by exalted persons like Bhishma, Prahlad, Uddhava, and Narada. The commentators say this means not just regular devotion, but prema. And Prabhupada says, this verse quoted from the Narada Pancharatra is found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the chapter that we're discussing here. And so then Rupa Goswami discusses how prema comes about. Just like before when we discussed bhava, where does it come from? And so it says two ways. It either comes from bhava, it's a maturing of bhava, or it can also come by the Lord's extraordinary mercy. The two different ways. Previously we heard that bhava could arise in two ways. There's two kinds of bhava, Vaidhi sadhana and Raganuga sadhana. We talked about how that raga means that you develop this really strong attachment to a particular relationship to the Lord, and that impels you forward. And that's raganuga. You follow, in the footsteps of some person that has some eternal devotee that has that mood. But otherwise, one can keep following the rules and regulations, and that can also take one to bhava. So it says each of these things. So if you have a bhava that's produced from vaidhi, that bhava can turn into a special form of prema. And if you have bhava that was produced from raganuga sadhana, then that can also mature into a different type of prema. Generally, it says that from vaidhi you get a type of aishvarya, prema in the form of awe and reverence, where you understand the Lord's powers. And from the bhava produced from raganuga sadhana, you get knowledge of Krishna's sweetness. You forget about his power. It's like the resonance of Braj. You get the madhurya type of prema. There's opulence and there's aishvarya and madhurya, sweetness. So prema arising from bhava, produced by vaidhi sadhana, is described here in the verse quoted in Nectar Devotion. In the 11th canto, 2nd chapter, verse 40 of Srimad Bhagavatam, this ecstatic love, born of the execution of regulative devotional service, is explained. A devotee, in the course of executing regulative principles of devotional service, develops his natural Krishna consciousness. And being thus softened at heart, he chants and dances like a madman. While performing chanting of the holy name of the Lord, he sometimes cries, sometimes talks wildly, sometimes sings, and sometimes, without caring for any outsider, dances like a madman. Doesn't care if he looks like how he appears to others. He's so absorbed in his ecstasy. And then the prema arising from bhava that was produced from raganuga sadhana, and you follow that, is given here. Chandra Kanti, a celebrated fair-faced girl, rigidly observed celibacy in order to obtain Krishna as her husband. She always engaged herself in meditating on the transcendental form of the Lord and always chanted the glories of the Lord. She did not desire to accept anyone else as her husband. She had firmly decided that only Lord Krishna would be her husband. So she had that strong notion of relationship to Krishna by husband. And that's usually the sign of that raganuga. And then there's prema arising from the Lord's mercy. An example of such extraordinary mercy is given in the 11th canto, 12th chapter, verse 7 of Srimad Bhagavatam, wherein Lord Krishna tells Uddhava, the gopis in Vrindavan did not study the Vedas to achieve me, nor had they ever been in holy places of pilgrimage, nor did they devoutly execute any regulative principle, nor do they undergo any kind of austerity. It is simply by my association that they have attained the highest perfection of devotional service. Remember, in the discussion of Bhava Bhakti, so the Lord's mercy takes the form of, it was like, you could simply he reveals himself to them simply by having good wishes towards them, and there was a third, by speaking to them. So this is one where he shows that by revealing himself to them, he shows the mercy that allows them to attain prema. And it mentioned that there are two flavors of prema. One has knowledge of the Lord's power, and then one that has understanding of the Lord's sweetness. Either can arise from the Lord's mercy. Prema with knowledge of the Lord's powers comes from the bhava, which has come from Vaidhi sadhana, and prema arising from bhava, which has come from Raganuga sadhana, is the type with the understanding of the Lord's sweetness. So either of them can either flavor can come from the Lord's mercy, and then the one with knowledge of powers comes from the type of bhava that arises from Vaidhi sadhana, and the one that comes the sweetness flavor. If it comes from bhava, it comes from the kind of bhava that came about from Raganuga. Prabhupada says, spontaneous attraction to Krishna, which is said to be due to the extraordinary mercy of the Lord, can be placed under two headings. One is profound veneration for the greatness of the Lord, and the other is one's being automatically attracted to Krishna without any extraneous consideration. That's the awe and reverence and sweetness, another way to put it. So I got a little typo here, prama instead of prema. But anyway, examples of the two types of prema are given in the scriptures. In the Narada Pancharatra, it is said that if on account of profound veneration for the greatness of the Supreme Lord, one attains a great affection and steady love for him, one is certainly assured of attaining the four kinds of Vaishnava liberation, namely achieving the same bodily features of the Lord, achieving the same opulence as the Lord, dwelling on the planet where the Lord is residing, and attaining eternal association with the Lord. The Vaishnava liberation is completely different from the Mayavad liberation, which is simply a matter of being merged into the effulgence of the Lord. And then again in the Narada Pancharatra, it says, pure unalloyed devotional service is explained as being without any motive for personal benefit. If a devotee is continuously in love with Lord Krishna and his mind is always fixed upon him, that devotional attitude will prove to be the only means of attracting the attention of the Lord. In other words, a Vaishnava who is incessantly thinking of the form of the Lord is known as a pure Vaishnava. So we mentioned that in that Raganuga sadhana, the motivation is that feeling of intimate relationship with the Lord. It's no longer a question of the Lord is great and I am small, I have an obligation to serve. The scriptures say I should serve. There's this just immediate attraction that comes from a feeling of real connection with him as another person. So that can transform into a certain type of bhava, which can transform into the madhurya style of prema, where the knowledge of Krishna's power and opulence is in the background. The residents of Vrindavan have that. The residents of Dwarka have it half and half. Right? And the residents of Vaikuntha have this notion of opulence and power. They understand the Lord's position very well. And then at the end, Rupa Goswami he gives an overview of this whole process, because this was an overview of bhakti, this way. So he kind of summarizes everything. He quotes these two famous verses, which is explained very nicely by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Madhurya Kadambini. You'll see these verses, I think it's in chapter 4, in the purport of chapter 4, verse 10 of the Bhagavad Gita. So this is kind of just, this whole section was a summary of bhakti. So this shows how it develops from the very beginning to the end, the various stages. So the whole process, which culminates in Prema Bhakti, begins with the association of pure devotees, and it develops according to recognized stages. And here's how Prabhupada describes it in the Nectar Devotion. He says, the beginning of ecstatic love of Godhead is basically faith. There are many societies and associations of pure devotees, and if someone with just a little faith begins to associate with such societies, his advancement to pure devotional service is rapid. The influence of a pure devotee is such that if someone comes to associate with him with a little faith, one gets the chance of hearing about the Lord from authoritative scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Thus, by the mercy of the Lord who is situated in everyone's heart, one gradually develops his faith in the descriptions of such authoritative scriptures. This is the first stage of association with pure devotees. In the second stage, after one becomes a little advanced and mature, he automatically offers to follow the principles of devotional service under the guidance of the pure devotee and accepts him as the spiritual master. In the next stage, under the guidance of the spiritual master, the devotee executes regulative devotional service, and as a result of such activities, he becomes freed from all unwanted occupations. When he is freed from unwanted occupations, this is anarthas, his faith becomes steadily fixed, and he develops a transcendental taste for devotional service, then attachment, then ecstasies, and in the last stage there is pure love of Godhead. These are the different stages of the development of pure love. And these verses here are quoted also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Adau Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangota Bhajana Kriya Tato Narta Nivritti Syat Tato Nishta Ruchistataha Ata Saktis Tato Bhavas Tata Prema Vidanchati Sadakana Mayam Premna Pradurbhave Bhavet Kramaha. Krama are steps. And so here's the Prabhupada translates it this way. It says, in the beginning there must be faith. Then one becomes interested in associating with pure devotees. Thereafter one is initiated by the spiritual master and executes the regulative principles under his orders. Thus one is freed from all unwanted habits and becomes firmly fixed, he said, unwanted obligations, unwanted habits here, and becomes firmly fixed in devotional service. Thereafter one develops taste and attachment. This is the way of sadhana bhakti, the execution of devotional service according to the regulative principles. Gradually emotions intensify, and finally there is an awakening of love. This is the gradual development of love of Godhead for the devotee interested in Krishna consciousness. So this is like a summary, of what we this overview of devotional service has been given in this section of the Nectar of Devotion in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So it seems like Rupa Goswami just kind of sums it up here at the end. So this is how it works. It begins with the association of devotees, and it works through these different stages, all the way up to the very top. So that's all. That covers chapter 19. Our Bhakti Shastri course is going to stop there with the Eastern Ocean. Things get pretty elevated directly after that. The Bhava and Prema are described in much greater detail and things. So this is the end of the line here. We've covered all of our books, and it's been quite a joy to do that. I've learned a whole lot. I hope some of you have learned something too. This is the end, and so I'm gonna. We have only persons online, so I'm going to prepare to have discussion with you, and let me pause my recording.